and welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play, but you know what this is. We are 202 episodes in, so if you don't know by now, my name is H. You can call me Ryan Hamann if you choose to, if you want to be fancy about it.
Yeah, and at this point, I'm Q, and you can call me Ryan Quintal if you want. Just today, I think, the fine folks over at Microsoft gave me a original Xbox wallpaper, dynamic wallpaper for the Xbox. And I have to say, I'm very excited to see leaning into some classic things. I'm hoping Banjo, maybe I see sometime soon. I'm hoping for more classic things. I've got Baldur's Gate installed on my Xbox Series X.
I can't say that necessarily an embracing of the classic slime in a tube Xbox startup motif in the new Series X architecture is any indication that any platforming revivals are going to be made. I wouldn't really call Banjo a member of the
original
Xbox family. Like, he made his Xbox debut on the 360 with Nuts and Bolts, or with the Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie remasters shortly before those, which do continue to play lovely and wonderfully on Xbox Series X. I have tested. I do like all the kind of like OG Xbox stuff that is being brought back. The original Duke controller. I mean, not that I would like choose to use one necessarily, but like just the fact that they've shied away from that point in history and have like produced at, great expense necessarily, a faithful reproduction of a controller that even they moved away from during later years of the Xbox's development is, I don't know, I like that commitment to history. I wish Xbox was an old enough brand to where we could really like get into some like retro stuff, like if this was like Sega or Atari or somebody that's been around forever.
Yeah, it's interesting. Every time that rumor crops up of like, oh, Microsoft's going to buy Sega, which I feel like gets floated probably about every 8 months or so in rotation, I keep having this feeling of like, what would that look like? Would it be that happens and suddenly Sega, like, suddenly we're at E3 and Microsoft is doing like, we've got a rich history of gaming, and they start with Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm like, no, you didn't make that.
The Xbox Genesis, the Xbox Saturn.
Right, Microsoft's Sega Genesis.
That's like what Google did when they unveiled the Stadia, is they had that display full of like a row of cases of like gaming innovations from years past, and it was like the Virtual Boy, the Dreamcast, and like things that had like famously failed. I think they even had like the Atari ET cartridge. And it's like, I don't know what you're trying to communicate, but like placing yourself as the newest step in a line of failures is a bold marketing strategy, and turns out to be a prescient marketing strategy.
Yeah, there is this feeling, right? Like of, if you have the hubris to think that you are going to snap a long line of, or like, look at all these who are ahead of their time and we're going to do something now that's also ahead of its time. And you're like, maybe in this market you want to do things that are just at their time or just beginning their time. That's like where the video game market seems to find its most comfortable point. But yeah, it's funny now because we're in this era, right, where I feel like I hear people talking about PlayStation the way that I think of as a Nintendo kid growing up, right? They're saying, oh, I remember, that early 3D stuff is what they're nostalgic for, and the spinning disc and the whole, I don't know, the fact that the PS1 played CDs or whatever. But I think of that stuff now as like, I remember it fondly, but it was a step towards where we are now, and where 3D gaming continues to evolve. But I don't know if I couldn't probably play the old Spyro games, but I could play Spyro Reignited.
Yeah, I think maybe this is kind of an unscientific way to look at it, but like, if gaming technology had stopped at the Super Nintendo era, I can still see myself being pretty happy with that. continuing innovations would cause, different types of games to evolve, but all within that kind of sprite. And, a lot of games do kind of evoke that Super Nintendo sprite era.
It's natural to assume we'd still get a Dead Cells or whatever.
Yeah, certainly. I can see it being quite a thriving industry, but if gaming technology had stopped at PlayStation, I guess we wouldn't know any better.
Yeah.
But it just feels like such a more bleak reality of the future of gaming always being these kind of like jagged, wobbly polygons. And I mean, it's fine as a step towards something greater, but I don't think it was an ends in and of itself. Plenty of PlayStation games that I like, don't get me wrong, but even of the ones that I like, it's hard to not look at their sequels and think, yeah, this is a vast improvement. Like maybe Parappa the Rapper is like the only one that I can think of that really peaked on PlayStation 1. But otherwise, I think, continuing technological evolution only benefited most of my PS1 favorites.
Agreed. And as an anecdote before we get into the pitches, I fired up my PlayStation Vita to just load a bunch of things on the memory card because I figured it was all going away until Sony made its change. But I've charged it up and I started browsing the store, and I was happy to see all these PlayStation 1 games that I could play on the Vita. Nowhere to be found was Metal Gear Solid 1. I was like, surely this game would, the Vita is perfect for being able to run so many PlayStation 1 games, and it's not there. And so I went and looked it up, and what was Metal Gear Solid 1's most recent appearance?
PlayStation 3?
It is the PlayStation Classic.
Yeah.
So we got it on that.
It's surprising.
I guess I'll pull that out of the closet.
I'm wondering if does anything that the Vita couldn't do that is necessary to finish the game. Like I remember when I played it on PlayStation 3, I had to do some sort of like management of
virtual
obviously
controller
you have
ports.
to like virtual controller ports for the Psycho Mantis fight, and I think you have to do some configuration of your memory storage or something to allow you to progress at some point. And you also have to like be able to dip into the virtual manual to get obviously you don't have to these days, there are alternatives, but if you were to like
I think the
sell
Vita
it
has
as a
that
commercial
still.
product, okay, well, you have to have access to the virtual manual to get to get Meryl's codec number, so you can give her a call at some point.
Yeah, you got it. It's still there. Isn't that crazy? That's still there. They should have made the PlayStation Classic literally just Metal Gear Solid and then all of the games that Psycho Mantis would comment on from your memory card.
Let's get into some video game pitches. I feel like we've danced around it long enough. Let's get into some creative expressions here on episode 202 of Playwright. I'll be going first. I've been dipping into some racing games recently. I was noticing today I don't particularly love racing games. That sounds pejorative. I should say I don't particularly have strong opinions about racing games, but I was looking at the games that I have installed on my Xbox Series X, and it was all like Forza Horizon 4, Burnout Revenge, Burnout Paradise, Split Second, Dirt 5. I was like, I have a lot of vehicle racing games on my Xbox Series X. Obviously, for Dirt 5 and Forza, like racing games have always been a great way to show off new hardware. Like they are spectacle. They are usually like very visually pleasing in ways that oftentimes feel impossible. If you're brand new to a new kind of series of hardware generation, then it can feel very impressive. But one of the things that I kept on thinking as I've been playing through some of these racing games is that car racing to me isn't that interesting because like there are some cars that are just like plain faster than other cars.
Right.
And sometimes you'll end up in a race where it's like you'll have somebody who just like zooms way ahead of you and there's just no way that you're ever going to catch up to them.
Yeah.
And you can be taking all the turns correctly. And it's just like, that's just not ever going to happen. And it's frustrating. And I don't know how to solve it because like some cars just are faster than other cars. And so I thought like, what if we do a like an on-foot racing game, something that is more expressive, maybe like a 3D version of like a Speedrunners or something like that, like where you have the expressiveness of a 3D platformer, but it is a point A to B race, and also take some of the Burnout Paradise DNA, have it exist in a kind of open world environment, probably like an open city. And so it really kind of lets you map out your own route and figure things out on the go. I wanted to call it kind of parkour-ish, but I didn't want it to be like a Mirror's Edge course. Like, I don't want to build out prescriptive jungle gym courses for people to follow. Like, I want it to just literally be a neutral playground that you can learn your way through, just like Paradise City, and race your way through on foot. So it is more about the tactile skill of movement than it is about the torque and horsepower of whatever vehicle you're driving. So I'm going to start the clock there.
One of the things that I agree with you about the racing game thing, one way that I've seen Forza series handle it in the past is, and Gran Turismo did this, but like assigning a class of car. But even that, like, there's range within a class, and
there's always like one car. There's like, this is just
right, like,
the
this
best
is just the
C-class car.
Right.
It's like, that's not interesting.
I agree with you. I do like when Forza Horizon like kicks me into okay, everybody's got like, a classic 1950s car that like turns like a boat and is kind of slow.
Yeah.
Or
that's the kind of thing that Wreckfest excels at.
Yeah.
Like, the cars in Wreckfest are like intentionally unpleasant to drive a lot of the time, and become more unpleasant to drive as they get beaten up. And like, that's the thrill of it, because everyone else is having as much of a problem as you are.
And I mean, this takes me into, because I'm watching Speedrunners gameplay after you had mentioned it. By the way, 200 episodes in, I don't know if I've ever publicly acknowledged it, but I will often, as you start to describe a game to me, go and watch gameplay to get the feeling and the vibe of it. I don't know if you do that too.
Well, I know all games already, so
yeah, that's true. That's why it's so hard to stump you in the redacted games.
It's happened.
The thing that I'm thinking about, right? Because I love this idea of like these big courses and flows and run speeds, but I wonder if we could bring in to a running game, like a physical parkourish game, some RPG-esque elements like we get with some car games, or even just like tuning elements for car games. And so maybe we let you, if we added in some mechanics of like, okay, well, you can have a pre-race shake of, a particular buff or something like that, and everybody can choose whatever buff they're going to get. And then maybe you also do like training. Because, with runners, like somebody who just straight up is putting in the training and putting the right things in their body is likely to be faster than someone else. If all things genetically are equal, those are pretty big determining factors. And I wonder how you could, when I think about class of car, maybe there's frequency or level of commitment with running. So you could be in the total, slob. It's a rough description, but you could be in the couch to 5K class, where you got a bunch of like our avatar gets a little out of shape and they're sluggish on the course, but it's fun. Everybody's bumping into each other, that kind of thing. Still a good time. Maybe a little bit more Fall Guys-esque. But if you commit to coming in, doing training with other people in like almost like unranked multiplayer, you can actually tone up your character and have them compete in higher and higher tiers of competitive play. So, eventually, like at the top level, the game does look like an intense match of speedrunners with these incredibly acrobatic people with all these crazy, swinging and jumping and flying through the air.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like that is kind of the concession that driving games make for accusations of a lack of expressiveness in the, I guess, how prescriptive the rankings of cars can be. I feel like they say, well, you can get any car to be a winner if you put in the work to fine tune it to be exactly how you want it to be. And then, they give you the options to replace the brake pads and the lift and I don't even know what the different parts of the car are, but like you get these really kind of like
the two.
when you like starting from like, I don't know, I first encountered it in like Need for Speed Underground, but these parts where they would like break apart the car and like show you each of the little tiny parts that you got to replace at your pleasure. To me, like I don't want to learn all of that. Like I want something that's really kind of accessible. You can just kind of get in there and play. And maybe you can train up your character to become more of a adept runner, but I feel like that kind of gets away from some of the immediacy that I wanted to impart as well. And so maybe there is like a story mode, but I would also want something that's easily pick up and play. Everyone's on an equal playing field multiplayer, so you don't have any kind of pay to win or the newbies are always going to get trampled by the experienced runners. I guess they would be because the experienced runners know all the shortcuts and stuff, but I don't want it to be a matter of like, well, that runner is just better than your runner was.
I have to admit, I have wondered multiple times, like what you could do with granted, I don't have a ton of experience with the first one, but what could you do with the Nidhogg 2 engine of stuff, and what would the Nidhogg racing game be like if it was kind of screen by screen based races? You could still fall, you could still fall down in a trap, you can still kind of trip yourself up, but that moment in Nidhogg when one person is just running for the hills knowing that they can die in one hit, there is a fury and a satisfaction to booking it in that game, if you will.
Yeah.
That I feel like if you added in some Pitfall style stuff, like it's like Pitfall at 7x the speed, but swinging and, platforming off stuff, you'd have a really kind of cool, fun racing game on your hands, on foot racing game.
So gameplay wise, what if we put this as kind of like a in-between point between like Super Mario Odyssey and Assassin's Creed, where you can kind of climb and swing around and you get kind of a realistic looking parkourish animation, but you also get the expressiveness of a Mario Odyssey, the ability to kind of defy logic and gravity with your wall jumps and dive jumps, and maybe some way to kind of like reroute yourself and reposition yourself in midair. Everything's a little bit larger than life, but ultimately like working towards specific goals. And I think like the interesting thing to me would be trying to balance the risk and reward of climbing buildings, because like Assassin's Creed in Mario Odyssey to a degree, in a lot of these types of games, Batman, Spider-Man is a great example, where like you spend a lot of time on the rooftops, but it's not because you're necessarily moving faster on the rooftops. And in fact, you can find yourself in really unfortunate positions where buildings are too far apart from each other, or there just isn't another building in the specific direction you want to go to. So it's like, why don't I stay on the ground? Well, because when you can swing from something on the rooftop, or when you can jump from rooftop to rooftop, like you can end up covering more ground. You have a little bit more freedom. There are fewer obstacles on the roof than there are on the ground. And so, finding natural ways to get players to want to climb, which in a racing game in which you're being tasked with kind of traversing a primarily horizontal space, dedicating time to the
climb,
dedicating time to the vertical element is essentially reducing your horizontal speed to virtually nothing. And so we have to make that trade-off worth it as well. Like if you get higher, there's some sort of an advantage to being up there that makes it like a real kind of neck and neck race between the players who stay on the ground and those who choose to climb.
I was also thinking about some of the locomotion that you're reminding me of, and the on footness is, I wonder what a third person Titanfall 2 gameplay experience would feel like, because I the way you can kind of endlessly wall run in Titanfall 2 is, I think that maybe also was similar in Titanfall 1, but I don't remember well enough. But I was thinking about this twist too of the risk reward, because let's say it's a Fall Guys-esque thing, or maybe there's a ton of racers to start. You see it in Fall Guys, this behavior of like the people who really know what's up or who are really good will all follow a similar min-maxed pattern, right? So maybe you can run and slide and stuff from the get, or you can start to try and wall jump and stay up. And would it be fun / risk rewardy for the people who are on the ground that are seeing all these expert players just wall jumping, just like totally moving faster than them? If you were one of the slow folks who's chosen to kind of take the lower path, have little, I don't know, tripwires or buttons or sensors that make fire fill the walls or something.
Oh, we're getting into split second territory.
Oh, I've never played
triggering traps for your.
Yeah.
Oh, you never played split second.
I've never played it. Yeah,
it is definitely worth playing. I went back to it recently on the Xbox Series X, and unfortunately, it runs at 30 frames per second and seems to be capped there. Which I understand there is a PC version with mods that can uncap the frame rate, but for a Burnout style racing game, a 30 frame cap is just not going to do it.
Yeah, I do like the idea of being able to foil the best players, like let the worst players foil the best players. And that to me is almost that Mario Kart-esque mechanic of like, hey, listen, person in last place is just going to get blue shells. That is what they are going to get.
Let's go ahead and close that one down, and let's come up with a name for this.
I've got a weird one for you. Spicy legs.
Spicy legs. I was thinking of something like parkour or something, like you are using parkour to try to reach distant areas, but I don't know.
Speed core, parkour.
Speed laces.
Ooh, laces
like
is interesting.
Racer, speed lacer. Laces is kind of fun, actually. Laces
out. What about this? Laces off.
Laces off. That's fun. It's like how about lace off? Like
lace off.
Nicolas Cage and John Travolta movie.
Yes, as I trace my fingers down your shoes.
I like it. We'll take his lace off. I like it. All right, lace off. Ryan Quintal, Q. Why don't you give us a pitch of your own?
So, speaking of open world games and speaking of Assassin's Creed, I would generically say this could be a Assassin's Creed / a Breath of the Wild sort of inspired thing, because I've been spending a lot of time in the past with the Assassin's Creed stuff, and in Zelda there's this feeling of kind of far futurism in some ways, even though it's very naturalistic. And I was thinking about, could there be a one of these open world style games where the mechanic is at either you can maybe either make it player driven, or maybe you and lock it behind some stuff, or you make it totally open, but the player can advance time, but they cannot rewind it. They can't ever bring time back. So you kind of get into the time machine type scenario where maybe you start off in ancient civilization, you can get all the way to modern times, but you can keep pushing until you're past you're in The Last of Us, you're past the fall of man, vegetation takes over, cities crumble, and maybe you're living through multiple societies. Maybe you go all the way to the end of the planet.
All right, I'm going to start the clock. So that's an interesting idea. I think if you're trying to solve a non-time-based puzzle with time-based mechanics, that creates an interesting dichotomy, because I want the passage of time to feel like an unintended side effect of what you're trying to produce.
Oh, interesting.
So, for instance, if you're trying to solve a platforming puzzle and you fast forward time until a structure collapses,
right? Is it just
you have to live with the consequences of being that far in the future for the short-term gain of solving that platforming puzzle. You also have to balance, like, should these puzzles be solvable without fast forwarding? Like, if we're punishing narratively people for advancing time, are we giving them any choice? With any kind of like time advancement story, there comes a point necessarily where the advancement of time becomes less interesting because like society has collapsed or whatever.
It's
so
nothingness.
if this is the mechanic for the game, if at the end of level 1 you're at the extinction of humanity, like how much are things going to drastically change from there? And even if things do continue to change with the kind of like ebb and flow of nature, is there any longer any kind of narrative weight to the passage of time if everyone you've ever known or loved is dead?
Yeah, well, is there meaning to the passage of time is a question we will never be able to answer on this show. But and I wonder if it's more playing up the cyclical nature of time and how, yes, there will be another group of people with another set of problems. Maybe it's more No Man's Sky-esque in the way that it handles the systemic sort of things you're exposed to. No Man's Sky is using it to do planet and world generation, but potentially each civilization advancement could be a series of these properties. Yeah, I kind of like wanted to recreate the feeling of someone in the way that you can in No Man's Sky kind of just say, no, you know what? This is the planet. This is where I want to be, which is something for, I think, anybody who's lived in multiple places. You reach a point where you go, no, you know, I think this is the place for me. And maybe it's your hometown, you go back home. Maybe it's a new place. Maybe it's the third place in the 10 places that you lived. But the idea of, no, this is the time is really appealing to me. And I don't know if there's a way to turn that into a mechanic, but I like the idea of what if we set up for these time puzzles, like you said, what is the risk of it just advancing the clock? Well, number one, maybe you need to complete puzzles to like get the element that allows you to jump into your time machine that only jumps forward. But the other thing I think we could do is if we set up early on, hey, listen, different materials decay at different rates, right? So if you want to fast forward far enough to decay these platforms or make this an easier platforming challenge, well, maybe the key is made of, I don't know, bronze or something that is not going to have the same shelf life as some of the massive stone pillars or something that it's around. And now you just can't do that puzzle.
We could. So, yeah, I think narratively we need characters and society to be a kind of an ever-present function of the story, but, you know, that works against kind of the core themes of like entropy and loss of opportunity. Maybe the world is cyclical. Maybe as a society falls, another one rebuilds. And so you never advance past, mechanically, you never advance past the point at which a puzzle is solvable because it will always be rebuilt. But again, does that undercut the like narrative consequences of what we're going for? Like if you're in the next cycle, if you started in the year 2000 and ended in the year 2000 of the next cycle, like functionally you don't know anybody there. And so it is essentially like you're in a completely alien world, and it doesn't mean like 4 or 5 cycles in, it's still going to be as alien as it was before.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I wonder if this is not about the open world, or maybe not even about puzzles necessarily, but what would it feel like to have a, this is probably not the type of trade-off that's possible, but could you have a Disco Elysium size space with a large, maybe 50% of the Disco Elysium size, but with that similar level of richness, and then do it across time? And maybe it's, you know, I'm thinking maybe there's something to the advancement where you kind of reach the end and you can't advance further, or your time machine breaks or something like that. But can you like extract the richness from each of the time periods and learn about the way that those people lived, and maybe solve the more mundane problems and go from everything that's like a murder mystery to, you know, a psychological thriller or something like that, but told in the time periods. So you almost like learn tricks and you hone your skills in these eras, and then something about what you've learned in the past, assuming, you know, the game doesn't totally become an alien thing to you, is applicable to the future.
It would be interesting narratively from a kind of determinist future perspective if you play a detective who like is tasked with solving a mystery and has to travel into the future, or, they can do their best to solve the mystery within their own time period. But if you were to go to the future, then you have access to DNA testing and historical records that far exceed the capabilities of the records in their own time period. And you can't bring that information backwards, but because time is cyclical and because time is deterministic and, the same combination of atoms moving in the same directions would produce the same results. Like you could solve the same mystery in the next cycle. It wouldn't be the people who originally hired you, but you could be getting justice for somebody else. But then you're like, well, why didn't I prevent the crime in the first place? I don't know. There's a lot of interesting factors there that I don't think would work mechanically in a video game, but would make for kind of a fun story maybe.
Yeah, I now I'm almost thinking about in terms of turning it more into a game, a little bit more scoped on the vignettes. Could you be a detective? Could the narrative wrapper be you're a detective living in the future? You do have access to time travel, but you can't time travel you have to time travel to specific points, and you can only stay for certain amounts of time. And because time travel is just kind of like, hey, whatever rules are that get established in time travel, things are the rules. But the point of it being that you're spending the narrative of the game taking all these unsolved cases and one by one going back in time. And so as you jump back to the future, you see how the future's changing based on your ability to solve all these crimes.
One of the most interesting releases from this year, video game wise, has been a game called Before Your Eyes, which I think I've talked about on the show before. I'm certain I have, where you're going through this kind of narrative, and then every time that you blink in real life, you're zapped at an untold and kind of random amount of time into the future of this character. That kind of being unsettled in time would be a really interesting mechanic if maybe we could use that same kind of mechanic, like a webcam that tracks your blinking and will move you either, forward or backward to a random point in time based like wherever you're standing in the game world. And so you can use that to your advantage as you are gathering clues and talking to witnesses and viewing where people were or are going to be at different times. But you can't control where you're going to end up. You have to use contextual clues. Maybe it's over the course of a day. And so you can use the position of the sun as like a way to kind of ground yourself and like where and when you are. And, but also like it would be it could be potentially annoying because you could be hearing out somebody's confession or somebody's witness account, and they're taking a long time to get to the details. And sometimes you just really need to blink. So you're like, come on, out with the details. There's that tension that comes from like, I don't know how much longer I can. And then if you blink, you relieve yourself, then that moment is gone. You have to find it again somehow.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then you're kind of always, I don't know if the term is you're kind of always fighting that your natural instinct, but yeah, it's like you really do. Maybe you create situations where you just know that if you blink right now, you're going to lose someone, or you're going to be put in that position. Maybe Before Your Eyes already plays with those types of themes, but it's interesting to me.
Let's close it down. We spent enough time there, and let's give it a name.
Oh man,
something like Time After Time. If we used that before, Time After Time, it's kind of like the song.
Time After Time. Let's get Cyndi Lauper out here. Let me look. You would think so. Time After Time. The search on playwrightcast.com is slow today. Your search did not match any documents. Bingo. Bango.
Documents. What a romantic way to talk about our creative endeavors.
I was going to say 4 years of work, and unfortunately our search does not match any documents.
Okay. Well, that'll work then. Let's claim it. And let's go to a contribution from our listeners. We had a very nice email in this week that I'd like to kind of skip forward in line and go ahead and read. This comes from a new name, as far as I can tell. Apologies if I have forgotten any previous pitches, but I believe it's a new name. This comes from a Michael Glasmacher. Is that right? Glasmacher, I would guess.
I think so.
Apologies if that is incorrect. Who says, first off, thank you guys for providing a safe space for my anxious brain to come to and focus on something else. It means more than you can know. I appreciate that. I think there's a certain amount of anxiety that goes into recording something, anything improv, and kind of being put on the spot to come up with something satisfying and creative. And so I'm glad that it is still coming across as like a relaxing.
Our anxiety can reduce your anxiety.
Like I just hope it's not layering on to people's anxiety and causing more of it. But it doesn't sound like that's the case. So anyways, love to hear that. Thank you very much for sending that in. He says, onto the pitch. You play as an electric pulse traveling through different neurons in the brain of a person with dementia.
Cool.
You're trying to get a certain memory or a thought, but there are blocked off pathways that force you to take routes to other memories to try to get to where you need to go. On your journey, you learn about the full life of the person and unlock new and different memories as you progress. Very interesting and challenging. I like it. Let's go ahead and start the clock.
It's interesting because something about this pitch took me straight to a really emotional end to the game. It like took me into the last, in the moment that is like the sort of the end of the game journey, where it's this kind of swell of emotion and the music is rushing in and there's this whole feeling, creating the feeling of the neurons going dark, and spinning down after a long life, or slowly realizing that you're not going to be able to go through any of your old pathways, or you can't go back and reference something anymore, as the mind and the body do what all bodies and many minds do. I don't know. It feels like very affecting to me.
I think grounding this in before your eyes, which we just mentioned, is a really strong kind of point of reference. To the moon as well, obviously has to do with like revisiting the memories of somebody who is suffering from old age memory loss, as well as you come to understand later on in the game other physiological effects that are blocking out certain paths that might be fruitful from a memory perspective. So if we want to kind of frame this as a puzzle, naturally it would be kind of a narrative first kind of game. And so it would funnel you down kind of a certain avenue, but it would be great if we can make it feel like we're kind of solving a puzzle along the way. What if we get a rough glimpse, an out of context scene that plays out almost like a Return of the Obra Dinn situation? Like we see a scene at the beginning of the game, and basically our mission is like, this is the happiest memory, or this is the most important memory of this person's life. See if you can access it directly to give them their, final moment before they pass, or whatever it is. Let them relive their happiest or the most important point in life.
Oh, interesting.
And we're given this scene out of context, and we don't know anything about it. And so kind of like Obra Dinn, we have to follow at first seemingly random routes to uncover other memories and try to gain more context that we can take back to that original memory. We start to recognize people, obviously that look different at various points in their life. We start to recognize maybe symbols or feelings, emotions that we can use to kind of like trigger similar like almost like her story in a way as well, where we can find a detail that seems important and we can like search for that detail, or we can kind of layer on that detail onto a memory later to go onto a slightly separate neural pathway and get to a different set of memories that will give us more vocabulary, more gameplay vocabulary to chase other avenues. And it's just kind of like a way of kind of like slip sliding through various scenes in this person's life to try to come to a predetermined conclusion and try to fully contextualize why this one scene we were given at the beginning is so important.
That's interesting. It almost, one of the mechanics when you brought in her story that it made me think of would be, could you do something where you're kind of saying to the player, hey, all these memories, like your hard drive is, hard drive is an analogy, but your brain can only access these memories for so long. And you got to sort through the memories that you think are important at this moment that you have access to and decide which ones you're going to kind of focus on or advance to the next drive, like the next drive that will be good for some additional period of time. And so you're almost like constantly trying to renew the lease on the most important memories as you maybe learn more things. I'm trying to think of, was it Obra Dinn? Oh, man, there was some game that just did this. Oh, it was The Medium that did this, where you kind of have a couple scenes where you're taking two joysticks and you're sort of syncing them up to, we've all done the lock-picking minigame.
Right, yeah.
It was the lock-picking minigame, but for memories, or reconstructing these experiences. And so, yeah, that feeling of reconstruction and maybe the frustration or manifesting the frustration of reconstruction getting more and more difficult and more tedious to even recall a single memory. And so like memories themselves, the lockpick game starts as easy as possible. It's like basically two joysticks barely on, one end of the controller or the other, and you've got a match. And then by the 4th, 5th, 6th, 10th time you've accessed that memory, now it's like a tedious, like, oh, I gotta really dig in to be able to get back and actually recall what that thing was.
Yeah, so one of the difficult details here is the pruning of information as you go. If the dementia is advancing, then old memories become inaccessible, but like that feels unfriendly to players who didn't take good notes the first time around, or if memories that you've already visited become inaccessible, we're kind of excluding players who maybe play 2 hours of the game, set it down for a couple months and then come back later. Maybe old memories are still accessible but become distorted in ways, like you lose certain pieces of information, but there's still enough to kind of give you a general reminder of what happened there.
Yeah.
But even that, like I've been guilty of walking out of the room when a cutscene is playing, and like, I don't want to punish people who just like had to answer an email and weren't paying attention for a moment. Like I don't want that ruining their entire gameplay experience.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I do think that maybe it's more of a matter of, I'm trying to think of an analogy about how dementia is experienced. Not that I'm like, neither of us are medical professionals, but that feeling of maybe if you give someone too much, the more confused they get. Or every time you watch this Obra Dinn-like scene, maybe something like literally the game has the ability to change some aspect of it, right? Like going back and watching, oh, we got into a fight. Where was the fight? It was the lake. I thought you said it was at the house. Maybe this is a person who, I know we get into mysteries and detective games quite a bit on the show, but I think mysteries are such a rich genre for both providing a narrative wrapper and a central puzzle to be solved. And I like the idea of kind of going and trying to find out, like, it almost like in that recent Don't Nod game where you're going through and you're like, okay, here's the memory. Is the memory reliable? Is that how that went? And playing with the mechanics of, well, you can watch a cutscene 10 times and maybe 3 things are changing about it, but these other 3 things are very consistent about it. And so as you learn more things, you kind of have to go back and fill in what was the canonical thing that took place based on this memory.
There was a movie last year, I think it was, called I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Have you seen that one? It was on Netflix. I think it premiered on Netflix.
Oh, I haven't.
It's kind of similar to this. It's somebody who's kind of an elderly person kind of at the end of his life, reminiscing about points in his life and thinking about where his life went wrong or what he could have done differently or better. But there's characters that are, entirely fabricated. There are scenes that play out that are clearly more of an amalgamation of a number of different experiences rather than representing one thing specifically. And then there's these imagined characters sometimes interface with these untruthful situations. And it's an interesting mix of these different elements that we're talking about. And I realize I'm kind of driving us over time now without resolving to a concrete and interesting point, but
we're talking about mechanics and wrappers and all that stuff. But yeah, I think everything from this game being a very literal, cool neon Tron-like puzzle game of, motorcycling through synapses is a maze and you're always trying to find the shortest path there and suddenly paths get closed, all the way to something deeper and more introspective with those neurons dying and things getting harder and harder over time. They're all interesting.
Let's go and throw that one back to the community. We've done our part for now. Feels like we didn't, but I feel like we put out some good thought starters anyways, and we'll look to the community to see how we end up resolving this one. So let's put a bow on that and come up with a name for what we have so far.
I love the phrase I'm thinking about ending things. I wonder if there's something like that flavor.
This isn't the case, but if we were to do a kind of zooming down neural pathways, then memory lane would be a appropriate wrapper.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Memory lane is good. And it's either like a arcadey thing or it's very melancholy.
All right, thank you very much, Michael Glasmacher, again, for sending that in. Again, apologies on the last name. No pronunciation expert here, but we do appreciate your email. And if you would like to email in something to one of our few remaining episodes, I think we have, 6 or 7 of these left to go, then you can do so by emailing playwrightcast@gmail.com. You can go to playwrightcast.com/pitch, or you can tweet us at playwrightcast.
Special thank you to PROTODOME for the use of our theme song, Hello World, off the album Blue Noise. And when you're listening to things, why don't you go check out the Kane and Rinse podcast? Why don't you go check out the Sausage Factory? And why don't you go give Sound of Play the send-off it deserves?
All right, let's go out with a redacted game. I'll be trying to stump you this week.
Stump me,
baby.
More
of a collaborative process than that, but we'll see how this goes.
For two people who are always trying to stump each other, we're very helpful to each other, I think.
Well, I think, I don't think it's fun for the listener or for anyone involved for there to be complete and total destruction on the court.
Yeah, agreed.
I think we all want that victory to come through.
Right.
Retrace the steps of redacted something, redacted loser, redacted from the original land of the redacted lizards through luxury cruises, tropical isles, and beyond in search of redacted right, or at least redacted now. All fives. Now this is odd. The phrasing of this one. All fives hilarious redacted are redacted for hours of redacted play. Whatever your age, redacted will make you eel better about your redacted. I don't know. That's not a hint. It's just
no. It's just poor
the way that it is.
Somebody let that copy happen. Okay. There's so many spelling errors that it makes me think it's either not English as a first language for this game or it's old.
Okay.
I'm a loser. There's lands of lizards and there's 5 worlds, 5 lands, 5 biomes, something. Ages of time. I'm gonna open my opening salvo. It's gonna be the story of something of a loser. I'm gonna go for oh my god, Now I'm not gonna remember the game. It is by Tim Schafer, and it's Starshak Black.
Brutal Legend?
Brutal Legend.
It is not Brutal Legend, which I'll have you know the main character of that is a very cool dude.
Is there anything in that narrative that's like he's dropped in from another world?
Yeah, he's a roadie.
Yeah, come on.
But it's not that he's like a loser. It's like he's kind of the last harbinger of the real meaning of metal in a world that has embraced kind of a popcorny punk metal. And he's dropped into like the heavy metal album cover and has to kind of show them how things do in the real world.
Dio has rocked for a long, long time. Okay, I'm gonna make my second guess, but I'm probably gonna need a ton of metadata and surrounding things. Is this Psychonauts?
This is not Psychonauts, and I'll tell you, though it's probably not going to be helpful at this point, that Tim Schafer was not involved.
It's interesting that the description of these 5 things but you know what? He'd have all of his copy together, wouldn't he? He's got the writing game together. All right, give me some metadata on this bad boy.
Okay, I'm not going to lie. It is not a wealth of metadata available.
You son of a...
But I will say that this is going to be unhelpful and it's going to throw you the wrong direction. So maybe take this as a extra hint that I am feeling uncomfortable about giving you this information, okay, thinking it'll lead you farther away from the truth. But it does have a 9.0 user score for what it's worth.
A 9.0.
And it has an ESRB rating of M and no metascore. No critical metascore.
Oh, God. A mature game
that 7 people seem to really like. I'm not going to lie. Like, this is not one that has a lot of activity on its Metacritic page, but like,
yeah,
it's definitely something that you would have heard of before.
Oh, boy. I'm definitely like combing my brain for there seemed like for a while in games there was that, hey, you're just a normal Joe Schmo and you're dropped into this world. What are you going to do? My brain goes to early 3D to make that happen, but the meta being so unfilled out maybe isn't.
Let me give you something else. I'll give you an extra guess on this one because you kind of burnt 2 guesses pretty quickly, but I'll tell you that this that I'm pulling from is for a compilation release. So it's not just a single game.
It's not just a single game. So before you said it's a compilation release, I was then trending towards like, could this be like a terrible licensed Evil Dead game or something like that? But no. Oh my God. I feel like not many people like it. The people that like it are way into it. Is there any sort of hint as to the era that I'm dealing with? Is it like 3D era or should I be going back to 2D in my brain?
I'll say that the most recent game in this compilation released in 1996.
Cowabunga. Okay. Cowabunga could be The Simpsons. Could be a Simpsons thing. But I know you. I feel like that means I'd be dealing with PC games or something. All right, sorry. One more walk through the description.
Retrace the steps of redacted something, redacted loser, redacted from the original land of the redacted lizards through luxury cruises, tropical isles, and beyond, in search of redacted right, or at least redacted now. All 5 hilarious redacted are redacted for hours of redacted play. Whatever your age, redacted will make you eel better about your redacted.
It'll make you feel then you're redacted.
About your redacted.
About your redacted. It's a series. And you're going on cruises. I was going Duke Nukem, but who goes on a freaking cruise? Oh, geez. Is this, if it is, I'm, I can't believe I'm going to say these words. Is this Leisure Suit Larry?
Let's find out by reading the unredacted description, and feel free to jump in if you have anything to say along the way.
Oh, God. Was there a collection?
Retrace the steps of 40-something lovable loser Larry Laffer from the original Land of the Lounge Lizards through luxury cruises, tropical isles, and beyond in search of Miss Right, or at least Miss Right Now. All 5 hilarious games are included for hours of risque play. Whatever your age, Larry will make you feel better about your love life.
About your love life.
Good job.
Jeepers crow. Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. Leisure Suit Larry. Did you redact the word games from that damn description?
Yeah, I mean, if it was like
all 5 games or something.
Yeah, I didn't want it to give away right at the very beginning that it was a compilation.
Let me type in Leisure Suit
Nudity compilation into Google here.
Box. Just to see what we're working with here. Lair. Man, I can't even find the one that you're talking about. How did you find
this is
it?
the Leisure Suit Larry collection on PC.
Okay.
On Metacritic.
Oh, I found it. 2006, huh? Bold of 2006 to think that was still a thing. 9.0.
I mean, Leisure Suit Larry games are still coming out. So I have to say, I don't know if I mentioned it on the show before, but in 2018, a different studio, I have to say, produced a game called Leisure Suit Larry Wet Dreams Don't Dry, which is a parody of Dark Dreams Don't Die, a Swery 65 Connect-only game. And then in 2020, they made a sequel to that called Leisure Suit Larry Wet Dreams Dry Twice, which is a parody of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice as a parody of a Swery 65 Xbox One Connect game. Like, it's crazy layers of meta jokes that must appeal to like only a small fraction of the gaming audience.
Oh my God, the layers just keep discovering new niche ways of attacking. Like,
I try to think of like the Venn diagram between Swery 65 Connect game, Sekiro, and Leisure Suit Larry.
Well, I mean, according to this Metacritic page, it starts at 7 ratings. So yeah, that's maybe those people are paying $600 a piece for the game, and it becomes worth it. I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I don't know whether or not the Leisure Suit Larry games are any good. I tend to think that, like, on one hand, you know, these kind of like titillation smut type of games tend to be not like
fun.
Titillation tends to make up for being lacking in other areas. But on the other hand, like,
in more ways than one, yes.
But on the other hand, like, for a character like this to persist for as long as he has, there has to be something to it. And I think like just the idea of kind of like a loser trying to, you know, score with women is kind of like a classic, if a bit raunchier, but like it feels like kind of a classic Looney Tunes type of setup anyways. And so I could see how this kind of thing might work. And so I'm really like, I really don't know whether or not these games are actually kind of good and fun, or whether they are just kind of, cheap thrills. We
got to see. I don't know who owns the license. Sierra seems like at this point their licenses would be with one of those crazy companies or Tencent.
Well, Crazy Bunch did the most recent 2 games.
Literally Crazy Bunch. So we need Microsoft to buy Crazy Bunch and then officially do the gritty reboot of Leisure Suit Larry Herb Xbox Last Major Nelson. Where he just goes around podcasting and reporting on Microsoft news to women, and it's a very different vibe.
And just like attractive women show up at his door, like, I'm here to deliver a pizza. Did you order a pizza? And like obvious like porn setups. And he's just like oblivious. He's like, fine, just put it on the table. I've got more podcasting to do.
That's
I've
right.
got to review this brand new blue Xbox One controller.
Or she's like, I'm here to deliver this pizza. He's like, that reminds me of smart delivery, the Xbox technology that allows entitlements to be kept. Oh, man. That would actually, go itch.io, get on the Leisure Suit Larry Herb's Xbox Live Major Notes, and I will be there day one, I promise. I'll be there in day 0. I'll be on the beta.
And with that, we wish you a very beta goodbye. Thank you for listening for another week.
Bye.